The rain hadn't stopped since dawn. Each drop that fell seemed to echo the weight inside my chest. My little boy's casket, so small, far too small for a child who had only just learned how to say mama, was lowered into the ground while my fingers trembled against the damp earth. The priest spoke softly, almost as if afraid to disturb the silence of grief, but no amount of soft words could fill the emptiness gnawing at me. I kept looking over my shoulder, half expecting to see my parents appear. They had promised me nothing, but I still prayed for a miracle, for them to stand beside me, even if just for show. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. They weren't there. Instead, my phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I wanted to ignore it, but the sound was sharp against the silence of the cemetery. My hands shook as I slid it out, rainwater smearing across the cracked screen. A text from my sister flashed across. "Can't believe you're still crying. Mom says it's pathetic." My heart lurched, my throat tightened. I hadn't even finished saying goodbye to my son, and already cruelty was being served up like a second eulogy. 2 minutes later, another message arrived. This time, it was a photo. The screen lit up with flashing lights, champagne glasses, balloons, gold and silver strung across the living room I used to call home. My brother, Aaron, stood with his arms wide, his grin stretched ear to ear. My parents flanked him, raising glasses. Beneath it, the caption read, "To success. Why waste tears when we can toast?" My fingers nearly slipped from the phone. They were celebrating, while I buried my child. The priest's words blurred into nothingness. I dropped my gaze to the grave, clutching a handful of wet soil. My lips brushed against it as if it carried some final connection. "I'm so sorry, baby. Mommy's here, even if no one else is." The wind whipped around me, carrying faint laughter from the direction of my parents' house only a few streets away. It wasn't in my imagination. They were truly hosting a party while I stood at the cemetery alone. When I returned home that evening, my apartment felt colder than the rain. The silence pressed against me like punishment. But from across town, music thudded through the night air. I imagined them dancing, glasses clinking, toasts being made, Aaron receiving applause while my son's name wasn't even whispered. I wrapped myself in my boy's tiny blanket, inhaling the faint scent of baby powder, and for the first time that day, I let myself collapse. The next morning, I confronted them. I walked into their house without knocking, drenched from another bout of rain, my eyes red and swollen. The remnants of the party were everywhere, empty bottles scattered on counters, streamers tangled across chairs. My mother turned to me, irritation flashing before pity ever could. "Oh, it's you. We thought you'd stay crying at that cemetery all night." My father didn't even glance at me as he added, "You can't expect us to put our lives on hold for a baby who barely lived. Aaron's promotion is something real, something worth honoring." My chest burned. "He was my child," I whispered. "Your grandchild." "Barely," my mother scoffed. "He didn't bring us pride. Aaron does. Don't guilt us for choosing joy over pity." She tossed the words like broken glass, sharp and uncaring. Aaron appeared from the kitchen, tie loose around his neck, smile smug. "You should have come last night. It was fun. But then again, you never were one for family celebrations, were you?" I stared at them, my nails digging into my palms. I wanted to scream, to break something, to let them feel even a fraction of what I felt. But I didn't. I walked out in silence sharper than knives, because I knew silence could become the loudest scream when the time was right. That night, lying awake, my boy's blanket clutched to my chest, I planned, not revenge in the usual sense. Something deeper, something that would turn their laughter into permanent echoes of shame. They thought grief made me weak. They had no idea grief had already carved me into something unrecognizable, something unstoppable. The days after the funeral blurred into one endless ache. I woke every morning with the weight of absence pressing down on my chest, the silence of my apartment screaming louder than any storm outside. My baby's crib sat in the corner, untouched, the mobile above it swaying with the faintest draft. Every time I passed it, my knees buckled. I'd run my hand along the railing, whispering apologies that felt hollow in the emptiness. Meanwhile, my parents lived like nothing had happened. I could hear about it through neighbors, music spilling from their house, Aaron's laughter echoing through the block. "They're so proud of their son," one neighbor told me casually in the grocery store, not realizing the knife she was twisting. "What a night that was, huh? Champagne, dancing, everyone saying your parents must be the luckiest in town." I just smiled tightly, gripping the handle of my cart until my knuckles turned white. One afternoon, I decided to test something I already feared. I went to their house. I didn't announce myself this time either. The living room was spotless now, as if the party had never happened. My mom sat flipping through a magazine, a glass of wine in hand, and my dad was fiddling with the TV remote. Aaron was lounging on the couch, scrolling his phone, legs stretched out like he owned the place. "Why weren't you there?" I asked, my voice steady though my insides trembled. My mother didn't look up. "At where?" "The funeral," I hissed. "Your grandson's funeral." Aaron snorted. My father finally glanced my way. "We had responsibilities, priorities," he said flatly. "You can't expect us to weep over every inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" I repeated, my breath catching. "My child was not an inconvenience. He was your blood." That's when my mother finally met my eyes, her lips curling. "No, he was your mistake. And thank God, at least Aaron gave us something worth celebrating." "You never did." Something inside me snapped. For a moment, my body trembled so violently I thought I'd collapse. But then a strange calm washed over me. I realized in that instant they would never see me as more than less. No apology, no scream, no plea could change it. They didn't just fail me as parents. They desecrated the memory of my child. I left their house in silence again, but this silence was different. It wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of a storm forming. The next weeks, I became a ghost in their lives, though I knew more about them than they thought. I started watching quietly, carefully. I knew Aaron's schedule, where he worked, when he strutted around town boasting about his promotion. I learned what my parents bragged about to their friends, their spotless image, their status, their perfect family. And every time I heard someone praise them, I felt bile rise in my throat. But I wasn't going to break down anymore. I wasn't going to let their cruelty stay hidden behind that fake facade. If they could humiliate me at my lowest, I'd drag them down to the place where they laughed at me, and I'd make sure they stayed there. I started small. Aaron had this habit of leaving his briefcase unattended at the office cafe. I slipped inside one day, sat a few tables away, and watched him prance out to flirt with someone. My pulse hammered, but my hands didn't shake anymore. I walked by, brushed past the table, and dropped a flash drive into his bag, loaded with files I'd carefully curated. Nothing illegal, nothing too obvious. Just enough fabricated inconsistencies that, when discovered, would make him look sloppy, irresponsible, and incompetent. The satisfaction wasn't immediate. It came weeks later when I overheard two men whispering at the diner. Aaron messed up bad. I heard corporates on his case. I stirred my coffee, my lips curving into the faintest smile. At home, I dug deeper. My parents adored their reputation, hosting charity events, bragging about their model family to neighbors. So I began poking at that image in ways only someone who knew their weak spots could. I spread whispers, not lies, but truths sharpened into knives. That they skipped their grandchild's funeral to throw a party, that they mocked their own daughter while she buried her child, that Aaron's promotion wasn't earned but handed to him through connections. The whispers grew legs. Suddenly, their friends weren't calling as often. Invitations dried up. My parents, once the center of every neighborhood event, were being quietly sidelined. I didn't stop there. The silence I carried after my boy's funeral had become my weapon, and I wielded it ruthlessly. Every time I saw my parents struggling to maintain their composure, I stayed quiet. Every time Aaron's colleagues laughed behind his back, I stayed quiet. Because silence, my silence, was louder than their parties, their cheers, their cruel words. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. My baby had been buried alone. They needed to feel what I felt. They needed to know what it was to stand abandoned in the moment you most craved family. And so I planned the final step. One they wouldn't see coming, one that would turn their smug faces pale, their pride into ashes. The night before I set everything in motion, I sat by the tiny grave where my son rested. My fingers traced the carved letters of his name, the earth damp from the evening dew. "They buried you in silence, my love," I whispered. "But tomorrow, I'll make sure they drown in the silence they gave us." My parents and Aaron were preparing for yet another party, this one louder, grander, a celebration of Aaron surviving the corporate storm after his supposed troubles. I knew the guest list, I knew the venue, and I knew exactly how to turn their stage into their ruin. I arrived early, unseen. The hall was decorated with gold streamers, long tables lined with champagne glasses, and a banner that read, "To Success and Family." The irony almost made me laugh out loud. I slipped into the back, carrying nothing but my determination. When the party began, Aaron strutted in, his suit too sharp for a man who'd been quietly demoted 2 days earlier. My parents walked behind him, proud as ever, their smiles plastered on like masks. They mingled, shook hands, and laughed, oblivious to the storm I'd orchestrated. One by one, their friends, colleagues, and neighbors arrived. But instead of applause, murmurs followed them. Instead of admiration, their eyes carried suspicion, because by now, the whispers I'd sown had spread like wildfire, and tonight they would face the embers. The first crack came when a woman from the neighborhood leaned in to my mother and sneered, "Strange choice, throwing parties when your own grandchild was buried without you." My mother's smile froze. My father tried to brush it off, but the murmurs grew louder. Guests glanced at me where I stood silently in the back, recognizing me now, whispering about the daughter they abandoned. Then, the man Aaron had been trying to impress most, his boss, stepped forward. "I've been reviewing your records, Aaron," he said, loudly enough for the whole room to hear. "Funny how the same errors we've been tracking appeared the same week you bragged about your promotion, almost as if your rise was a lie." Gasps rippled through the room. Aaron's face drained of color. My parents tried to control the damage, pulling people aside, insisting I was a bitter daughter spreading lies, but the truth was heavier than their excuses. A neighbor shouted, "We saw her bury her baby alone while you hosted a party. Who does that?" And just like that, the crowd turned. I walked forward then, slowly, every step echoing in the hush that fell. My mother hissed, "Don't you dare!" My father snarled, "You'll ruin everything." I stopped in the center of the room and finally spoke, my voice steady and clear. "You already ruined everything the day you laughed while I buried my son alone. The day you called him a mistake. The day you proved I was nothing more than trash to you. Tonight isn't about me ruining your lives. It's about you finally standing in the ruins you built yourselves." The silence after my words was suffocating, and then, one by one, people began walking out. The boss left first, then the neighbors, then the friends who once hung on my parents' every word. Glasses of champagne sat untouched. The banner above the stage drooped as someone tore it down on their way out. By the time the room emptied, only my parents, Aaron, and I remained. My father's face was purple with rage, my mother's eyes wide with disbelief, Aaron trembling like a child. "You'll regret this," my father spat. "Family is everything. Without us, you're nothing." I stepped closer, my voice calm, almost cold. "Family is everything. Yes, but you were never family to me. You were the storm that took everything from me, and I'm done letting you take more." I turned my back on them then. For the first time, I wasn't the one left behind. They were. In the weeks that followed, the collapse was complete. My parents' invitations stopped coming. Their neighbors crossed the street to avoid them. The charities they loved so much found new hosts. And Aaron? He lost his job, his reputation shredded, his arrogance stripped bare. And me? I rebuilt, quietly, patiently. I found strength in the silence of my apartment, in the memory of my son. My parents had wanted me to suffer in silence, but instead, I weaponized it. I turned it into the knife that cut away their pride, their masks, their empire of lies. I visited my son's grave again one evening, the sky burning orange with sunset. "You're not alone anymore," I whispered. "They are." As the wind brushed past my face, carrying the faintest chill, I knew justice had been served, not in flames, not in fists, not in chaos, but in the crushing weight of the very silence they once forced on me. And for the first time since the day I lost him, I walked away from that grave feeling lighter. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.